Okay, let's unpack this. We're seeing these really powerful waves of protest, of civic action, kind of rippling across the globe right now. There's this feeling, you can almost touch it, that things must change. You look at the streets of Paris, then you look halfway across the world to Kathmandu. People are making their voices heard.
Yeah.
And in really dramatic ways, they're challenging the status quo, with an intensity that, well, it demands our attention. Just this month, September 2025, Paris has been absolutely gripped by this block on tout movement. Block everything. The images are striking. We've seen buses on fire in Rennes, trains stop cold in the southwest, and riot police clashing really fiercely with the demonstrators.
Yeah, the numbers are pretty stark, too. Over 200 arrests just on the first day. And that was despite, 80,000 police deployed nationwide, a huge operation.
Huge. And France's Interior Minister, Bruno Retailleau, he accused protesters of trying to create a climate of insurrection, to which, the French, with their long history of dissent, might just say, "Mais bien sûr," of course.
Exactly, but it's not just contained to France, is it? Just this week, we saw these mass Gen Z protests erupt in Nepal, almost out of nowhere, it felt like.
With astonishing speed. The federal parliament complex itself set ablaze. Prime Minister Oli forced to resign.
Yeah.
The military deployed.
And tragically, 19 people killed in clashes, triggered, it seems, by these deep-seated corruption issues, but also this government ban on social media, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, just shut down.
Which is huge. Amnesty International is already calling for an independent investigation into the police crackdown. Really shows how serious it got, how quickly.
It does, and I think this is the key point. What connects these events? Paris, Kathmandu, they seem worlds apart.
But they're not isolated, are they? They feel like symptoms of this widespread public frustration. Frustration with how things are run, with economic hardship, with leaders just not seeming to listen. It's bubbling up everywhere.
That's right, and that's what we want to dig into today. We're taking a deep dive into these global surges of dissent.
We'll look at the immediate sparks, sure,
Yeah.
but also connect them to the bigger picture. The historical context, the systemic challenges facing democracies. And this is really fascinating, we'll use a groundbreaking foresight report to imagine how democracy might evolve, specifically in South Asia, over the next 15 years or so.
And this deep dive is really for you, listening, to help grasp these complex connections shaping our world, and ultimately what it might mean for our shared future.
Okay, so let's start with France. Zero in on this Black Everything movement. The immediate spark was definitely political, intense political drama, really.
Right. Prime Minister Bayrou, he was Macron's third PM in just a year, wasn't he? He gambled on this big austerity budget.
A massive gamble. Freezing pensions, getting rid of 2 public holidays, slashing, 44 billion euros in spending?
A huge sum, and he lost the confidence vote, had to resign.
So Macron scrambles, installs Sébastien Lecornu, his 4th PM in 12 months. But it didn't calm things down. The streets were still furious. It just fueled the Block Everything movement even more.
And this movement, it's interesting, launched over the summer, mostly online, right? TikTok, X, Telegram.
Exactly. And no clear leader, no central committee handing out orders, which makes it really hard for the government to even know who to talk to or how to stop it.
It has echoes of the Yellow Vests, that decentralized kind of meme-driven approach. And the grievances are broad, too. It's not just the budget, it's inequality. It's calls for Macron himself to resign.
Which brings us back to the Interior Minister calling it an insurrection. And that classic French reaction, mais bien sûr.
It really does highlight something fundamental about France, doesn't it? That accusation and the almost expected shrug in response. It speaks volumes.
So why is that? Why does France seem to protest with such ferocity, almost like it's a national sport?
Well, you remember what de Gaulle famously said during the May '68 protests? People wanted him to arrest Jean-Paul Sartre, the philosopher, and de Gaulle just quipped, "You don't arrest Voltaire."
You don't arrest Voltaire. That's brilliant.
It captures it perfectly. In France, rebellion isn't just seen as, a crime to be punished. It's heritage. Dissent itself is almost sacred.
That's a really powerful way to put it. And you see it throughout their history. From those medieval charivari, these wild, noisy, public shaming rituals.
Right.
To today, protest feels like a civic duty, not just, making noise. And the striking thing is, historically, it actually works for them.
It often does. The 40-hour work week, the right to unionize, pension reforms withdrawn in '95, student reforms scrapped in 2006.
All won on the streets, not just in Parliament. The lesson seems to be, the ballot box picks the leaders, but the barricade, That keeps them honest.
Precisely. And you just have to look back to 1789, the French Revolution. Storming the Bastille, the March on Versailles, that whole let them eat cake myth. It's the foundation.
It set the stage for everything that followed. This cycle of monarchy, republic, empire.
Often punctuated by uprisings, even Napoleon, crowning himself emperor, was arguably exporting revolutionary ideas, albeit by force.
And fast forward to the 20th century. May 1968, that's the modern template, isn't it?
Absolutely. Students protesting stuffy universities. Suddenly it snowballs. 9 million workers on strike. Paris paralyzed.
De Gaulle himself apparently fled briefly, wasn't sure the republic would hold, and he even admitted later something like, repression wins battles, but rebellion owns the narrative.
A profound understanding of where real power can lie. And what's really interesting now is how Macron's Fifth Republic, which was designed, ironically, to prevent this kind of instability, to centralize power.
Right, the semi-presidential system.
Exactly. It seems to have pushed the real opposition onto the streets instead. He survived the Yellow Vests back in 2018-19. He pushed through pension reforms last year despite massive protests.
But this block everything movement, amorphous, leaderless, it feels different. It's exactly what that centralized system was designed to avoid, but now seems unable to contain.
To the point where you hear analysts whispering about maybe a Sixth Republic being needed?
Okay, so that's France, this deep historical root of dissent. But how does this connect back to what we saw in Nepal? And maybe other places too. What are the common threads here?
Well, I think if you step back, you see both the French and Nepalese situations highlighting very similar things. It's this widespread public frustration with how they're being governed, with economic pain, with feeling like leaders just aren't listening or responding.
So different context, but similar underlying feelings of alienation, maybe.
Yes, exactly. These aren't just isolated flare-ups. They're linked by these deeper currents. Economic hardship is a huge one.
Absolutely. And if we look specifically at South Asia, the World Bank's latest overview, it paints a pretty worrying picture. Growth prospects are dimming, expected to soften to maybe 5.8% in 2025.
Which sounds okay in isolation, but there are real vulnerabilities. Global uncertainty, sure, but also domestic issues, like governments not having much fiscal room to maneuver, poor tax collection.
And crucially, not creating enough jobs, especially for the massive youth population there. We're talking over 700 million people under 24. More than 1 million joining the workforce every month until 2030.
It's staggering. That's a huge demographic pressure cooker if opportunities aren't there.
A ticking time bomb, potentially.
And then you layer on top of that climate change, which isn't just some future threat. It's actively making things worse now.
Oh, so? What's the connection there?
Well, there's this new study, the ICE Journal, I think, looking at Asian glaciers. They're losing something like 22 million kilograms of ice every single year, especially in the central Himalayas, Nepal, Uttarakhand.
Wow. And the downstream impact?
Massive. Over 1.4 billion people rely on those water sources. So less glacier melt means higher risk of droughts, but also paradoxically more risk of severe flooding from glacial lake outbursts. It destabilizes everything.
And South Asia is already incredibly vulnerable.
Right. One of the most vulnerable regions globally. You've got something like 67 million people hit by natural disasters each year, nearly 750 million living in what are considered climate hotspots. This isn't just an environmental crisis, it's a social and political one too.
It really multiplies the existing stresses.
Definitely. And then there's technology, the third piece of this puzzle.
Right. We saw it in Nepal. Social media was the spark. Then the government shut it down, control. And in France, bloquant spread like wildfire online. Mobilization.
It really highlights that dual power, doesn't it? Technology as a tool for citizens to organize, to demand change, but also as a tool for states to monitor, to censor, to control the narrative. It cuts both ways.
So with all these pressures converging, economic strain, the climate crisis intensifying, this double-edged sword of technology, what does the future hold?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And that's where this International Idea Foresight Report comes in. Imagining Democratic Futures, South Asia Foresight Report 2025.
Okay, so it tries to map out potential pathways.
Exactly. It lays out 4 possible scenarios for democracy in South Asia by 2040. Importantly, these aren't predictions, they're more like thought experiments. Tools to help us understand the possibilities and maybe steer towards better outcomes.
Let's get into them. What's the first scenario? The one that might feel maybe closest to today?
That's the continuation scenario. Business as usual in this future by 2040. Well, things kind of muddle along, but not in a good way. Political fragmentation continues, maybe even deepens. Authoritarian tendencies persist.
So no major breakdown, but no real progress either.
Pretty much. Wealth inequality keeps growing. Major cities like Delhi, Islamabad, they become almost unlivable due to pollution, failing infrastructure, local governments struggle, people rely on individual coping mechanisms, air purifiers in Kathmandu, AC in Karachi, mandatory masks for kids.
So the burden shifts to the individual while systemic problems fester.
Exactly. National politics becomes less relevant for everyday life. Local civic action might pick up, but it's more about survival than transformation. Rights get pushed down the priority list. There's even a mention of a resurgence in traditional patriarchal values gaining political ground.
Grim. And there was a headline mentioned.
Yeah, a chilling one. Delhi population to have in 20 years, suggesting people just leave because it's unlivable. The key insight here is how decline can become normalized if there's no bold leadership.
Okay, that's the muddling through decline picture.
Yeah.
What's the next one? It sounds even worse. Decline scenario. The dance of Shiva.
It's bleak. It envisions democracy really deteriorating across the board in South Asia. Think crony capitalism totally entrenched, power and wealth concentrated in very few hands.
And technology used for control.
Pervasively. A massive surveillance and censorship industry becomes a major employer. Dissent is actively stifled. Ecological breakdown is irreversible. You see headlines like water wars over privatized water in Islamabad.
So the state is strong, but repressive, and the environment collapses.
And elections become just a formality, mainly for doling out patronage. The West loses interest in promoting human rights. India potentially develops its own distinct authoritarian model, regional cooperation, a thing of the past.
Wow. AI writing news. Big tech selling surveillance.
Glacial floods driving youth migration. It's a future where the very structures for collective action for civil society are dismantled. Geopolitical tensions rise, minorities become extremely vulnerable. It's a dark path.
Okay, let's pull back from that darkness. What about improvement, the disciplined improvement scenario? From multilaterals to minilaterals, how does that come about?
Interestingly, this scenario starts with a catastrophe. A massive Indian Ocean tsunami in 2025 hits Mumbai, Chennai, Colombo, Karachi, causing huge displacement, food insecurity.
So disaster as a catalyst for change.
Potentially. In this scenario, unlike the dance of Shiva, governments are forced by public pressure by civil society to actually collaborate. They start working together on managing migration safely, tackling climate impacts, reining in the misuse of technology.
So a crisis forces cooperation that wasn't happening before.
Yeah.
But it's disciplined improvement, not radical change.
Exactly. It's incremental. Visa rules get relaxed somewhat. Affordable housing projects start. Regional bodies like SAARC, maybe ASEAN, actually become useful forums for practical solutions.
SAARC becoming useful would be an improvement.
Wouldn't it? There's even talk of exploring South Asian citizenship or a common currency down the line. Knowledge sharing happens. India and Pakistan may be collaborating on fighting pollution, using fungi to boost food security. Ethical AI gets woven into climate adaptation.
So progress is possible, but it's hard-won, maybe triggered by shocks, and needs sustained effort.
That's the core idea. Focused collaboration fueled by civic pressure can lead to real gains, even if it's not a perfect transformation.
Which brings us to the final, most hopeful vision, transformation scenario, towards a green and equitable future. What does that look like?
This is the truly aspirational one. South Asia becomes, and this is the quote, the global epicenter of democratic progress. SAARC isn't just useful, it's revived and united. There's a fundamental shift away from purely extractive capitalist values towards sustainability, equality. They talk about a solar punk society. You see the emergence of civillages, these integrated city-village spaces that bridge the urban-rural gap, becoming hubs for sustainable growth.
Interesting concept. And driven by whom?
Youth are key. Youth-led protests, like ones triggered by heavy rains in Nepal, actually lead to policy changes like quotas for young people in elected office. Young entrepreneurs create ethical tech startups focused on tackling corruption through crowdsourcing, boosting transparency.
So bottom-up change, leveraging technology for good, leading to a real paradigm shift.
By 2040 in this scenario, 40 South Asian villages are ranked among the world's most livable cities. And maybe, just maybe, South Asia elects its 5th woman prime minister in a row.
That's a powerful image of transformation. But it requires a huge shift in values, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That's the crucial question this scenario raises. It's not just policy tweaks. It's a deep reorientation towards sustainability, equality, deliberative democracy, even integrating indigenous knowledge. True transformation requires rethinking fundamental values and power structures.
Yeah. So four very different potential futures. But looming over all of them, especially in South Asia, is the relationship between India and Pakistan. How does that fit in?
Yeah, you can't really talk about South Asia's future without addressing that. Our sources are pretty blunt about the current prospects for dialogue. They're bleak. Both sides have these deeply ingrained narratives about each other that seem mutually exclusive.
And the risks are huge, obviously.
Nuclear conflict is the ever-present nightmare, but also the shared challenges they both face. Climate change hitting them hard, governance issues, human rights concerns. There's a critical need, the sources argue, to transform that relationship and revive regional cooperation like SARC. Their survival in many ways is linked.
But how do you get there from here? The hostility seems so entrenched.
The sources stress it has to come from political leaders, not just diplomats. Leaders need to foster a national realization on both sides that they have a shared stake in survival. Political movements pushing for more democratic, people-focused governance could help rationalize national policies away from pure antagonism.
Easier said than done, though. What are the big roadblocks?
On the Pakistan side, the report points to the military's influence. The argument is that the military benefits from the continued hostility as it helps maintain its political power, so it's institutionally resistant to a real breakthrough. On the India side, the current governing BJP's electoral strategy is highlighted. Its focus on Hindutva nationalism, hostility towards Pakistan, actions in Kashmir, threats over water resources. These are seen as equally significant obstacles to normalizing relations.
So deep-seated internal political factors on both sides make cooperation incredibly difficult, even when the shared risks are obvious.
Exactly. Domestic politics often trumps regional stability or shared existential threats.
Okay, so wrapping this all up,
Mm.
what does this mean for you listening to this? We've gone from protests in Paris and Kathmandu to these sweeping potential futures for South Asia. It's pretty clear that huge forces, climate change, economic pressures, technology, they aren't just background noise. They are actively reshaping democracy, reshaping civic life.
Absolutely. And the path we end up on, whether it looks more like business as usual or hopefully something better, that depends on the choices we make, collectively, individually. And this deep dive really just underscores how urgent it is to grapple with these complex, interconnected issues.
It does. And there's a really important question that comes out of that foresight report. How can public officials, how can governments balance the need for expert advice with more deliberative democracy? Ways that actually include citizens in making decisions.
Could those more deliberative approaches actually build more public trust? Could they increase engagement? Could they help steer us away from the dance of Shiva and towards disciplined improvement or even transformation?
It's something to think about, isn't it? How can you, in your own community, in your own sphere of influence, contribute? How can we shape a future that leans towards those more hopeful scenarios given these massive challenges?
The answers probably aren't just in grand political statements. They might lie more in local action and critical thinking and being willing to engage with different views.
And maybe in just a shared commitment, a commitment to building a more democratic and definitely a more sustainable world.